remember an actor named Charles Nelson Reilly?
It rings a bell.
The name sounds familiar. I don't know who it is, though.
Never heard of him.
Well, I mostly remember him on the match game, how he's not matching the people and getting mad at them.
I think my first memory was Ghost and Mrs. Muir, like way back when.
Captain's hat and
with a pipe in his mouth.
He had a very distinctive laugh.
That's very good.
Oh, thank you.
That's very
Thanks.
good.
I remember this guy.
Great. That's great.
Is he still alive?
Hi, and welcome to Director's Cut. I'm your host, Charles Monroe Kane. Here at Director's Cut, we're dedicated to bringing you the best in independent films and filmmakers. Our film this week is a documentary called The Life of Reilly about Charles Nelson Reilly. A lot of us remember Charles Nelson Reilly as the pipe-smoking, sailor hat-wearing mainstay on the game shows of the 1970s. But this documentary absolutely blew me away in my preconceived notions of who he was. The Life of Reilly was directed by Frank Anderson and Barry Poltermann. It is great to have you guys here. You know, I have a question for you guys. When I got in to watch this documentary, I was ready for kitsch. I was ready completely, almost to make fun of him. I thought he would be serious at the end. But instead, you know, I was really blown away by this film. Tell me who people think Charles Nelson Reilly is and actually who he was. Who do people think he is?
People think he's a game show icon who sold his soul to Hollywood, and that's it.
Right.
And who Charles Nelson Reilly actually is a renowned stage director, Broadway actor, Broadway star, international opera director. But more than that, a man with a very interesting story.
Yeah, very. I was impressed. Now, you guys are both from small towns in Wisconsin. So
that's right.
Tell me first, for both of you, what's your first memory of Charles Nelson Reilly?
I think that actually we have the same first memory, which you
Ghost and Mrs. Muir.
Yes,
yeah.
Ghost and Mrs. Muir. Although you remember, you knew more about Charles's history as a Broadway star than I ever did.
Yeah.
I mean, my main memories of him growing up were It Pays to Be Ignorant. I don't know if anybody remembers that show. But being on, obviously, Match Game.
Yeah, sure.
The Dean Martin roasts or just the Dean Martin show. He was so all of that sort of The Love Boat,
sure.
all that kind of kitschy stuff. That's mainly what I remember Charles.
You see, that's all I know him as. I talked to a lot of my friends after I watched this documentary. I was like, who's Charles Nelson Reilly? Who's Charles Nelson Reilly? And they all had the pipe and the hat, and they remember certain moments and double entendres and the drinking in Manhattan but he's much more than that. I was kind of blown away by that. And before we talk about him anymore, what I think we need to do is see a clip before we can talk more about him, because I think that people need to see what film you really made of this man. So here's a clip from Charles Nelson Reilly.
And at that time, the end of the 30s, Paramount decided that they didn't need watercolor airbrushing for advertising anymore. And they went with the photograph, which is used today. The photograph, rather than the hand-painted design. And my father's work in 1939 diminished. There was no need for Charles Joseph Reilly, head of the art department of Paramount Motion Pictures. My daddy told me that he can still hear the razor blade of the man who took the gold leaf off, which was once his name, on his door, and it fell to the floor. And he started drinking heavily, and he had what everyone seemed to have in those days, a nervous breakdown. And he had to be institutionalized. And they took my father away. Two men came in a light blue Chevrolet. And they put my father into like a sort of funny sweater. And I said, Mama, what's that? And she explained it was a straitjacket. And they took my father down the stairs. My father, the artist, went into the Chevrolet, the light blue Chevrolet.
Wow, that is such a powerful clip. You know, I watched this film the night Studs Terkel died. He was a huge fan of mine. For a lot of people who don't know who he is, he's a radio documentary man, and he was in his mid-90s, and he's the reason I got into radio. I do a radio show as well, and he was a huge inspiration to me. And I watched this film, and I'm like, wow, this is what we're supposed to be doing, right? As young people, we're as people younger than that, we're supposed to be documenting these men before we've got to document their stories. I cried watching this film, and I thought to myself, why did you make...
It's funny, too.
It is funny. No, it's very funny, too.
It's
very,
a
very
laugh
funny.
riot.
Yeah. But why did you make this film and not that film? You know what I mean? Like, there was that film that could have been made. Why did you make this film?
I don't think we ever intended to make that film.
Mm-hmm.
This is it. This is all we had in mind, period.
Yeah, I mean, this came about because when we originally wanted to, originally we had heard about this show. I had thought about...
the stage show.
The stage show. Right. And I had heard about it, and I wanted to go see it just because I thought it would be funny and kitschy, and and I around the office of everybody that I at the company that I had out in Los Angeles at the time, I said to everybody, hey, this is going to be great, we'll do this, and nobody knew who he was. It was pretty much a young 20-something group of people. They had no idea who it was. I was like, oh, you're going to have to see this. So I called up and couldn't actually. The show wasn't playing anymore. It had already moved on. So I did this like Google alert thing to just sort of track the show around the country. And the reviews kept coming in, and they were amazing reviews. And it started seeming really intriguing to me because the reviews that I was reading were something more akin to what you just saw, the clip you just saw, a very different kind of Charles Nelson Reilly than I thought I was going to see when I originally was going to see the show. So we contacted Charles' agent and just said, hey, can we see some clips of it? And Charles, he called back and said, only if you come over to Charles' house tomorrow.
Of course.
He'll cook you dinner.
Oh, yeah.
And you can watch the show at his house. So we went over and watched about 5 hours of raw videotape that he had taken over the years of just friends and sort of amateur home movies of the show. And the second that we saw that film, and Frank wasn't at that, I made copies of that footage and sent to him back in Appleton. And the second we saw that, I think, and talked about it, it was very clear what... We could have made several different movies out of the material because some of it was very just goofy and lighthearted and funny, and some of it was very serious. And I think that what attracted us to it was the unexpected.
Yeah, very.
Charles.
We struck a good balance. And what about you? Why did you want to make this film? What got you into wanting to dedicate so much time to doing this?
That's the reason. The show as he presented it on stage.
So it touched you, or did you just?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, people need to, a bigger audience needs to see this.
Yeah. Both. I mean, it's the thing we all look for, a good story. That was a good story. Charles had a great story. And it was accessible. It looked like we could really do this.
I think also for both of us, there's this thing about when you make a film where you make something that you want to see.
Sure.
You make a movie that you'd want to watch. And if I was, looking through the guide at Sundance or looking at my satellite cable guide, I wouldn't miss this.
But I want to back up for a second. He was done, though. I want to make sure people... He was done. He wasn't doing this anymore. He's retired. He's done.
He hadn't done the show in about 2 years, actually.
So the stuff we're going to see of him isn't just some random clips from the show. You guys pulled him out of retirement.
We put on the show.
You put on the show. The stage. You did everything.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's amazing.
By the time he was done touring the show, we had kind of forgotten about it, actually. And a couple years had passed. And... a friend was talking. I was just over having drinks with a friend one night, and he was talking about how he was doing an Evel Knievel musical. He was in the middle of developing it, which I said was a terrible idea. I had a way better idea that I was going to go shoot the Charles Nelson Reilly biography, one-man stage show, which he actually said, that's a great idea. So that was kind of it. I mean, that got us down the path. So
I want to show another clip, but I mean, it really shows. I mean, not only it didn't just want to make this film. I mean, you guys get him out of retirement. You have to meet with him, and you have to do the whole stage show. You got to put it on.
Oh, we pulled all the props out of his garage in his Beverly Hills home.
Amazing.
Right next door to
He still had them all
Dickinson.
stored. Well, he either had them actually in his living room or stored in his garage. When you opened his garage door, it was just packed with props from the stage show.
Well, we're going to talk about props in a minute because we're going to show another clip. So let's see another clip from The Life of Reilly.
But he got me a job as an usher at the Bushnell Memorial Hall, a legitimate theater in Hartford, Connecticut. And I wore Schwartz's suit. We were the same height. And I had my uncle's tie. And I stood up in my perch in the second balcony, and I heard something that I had to hold on to the walls. I heard 3,200 people laughed at the same time. And I saw the people on the stage, Beatrice Lilly and Bobby Clark, the Marx Brothers. And then there was a little Jewish woman that came with her troupe every year. And that woman's name was Molly Pecan, and the Yiddish Theater. And I realized that laughter was the same in every language. I have to find that out. Mark Twain said the only help for mankind is laughter. The greatest thing a man can have is laughter. And I had to learn how they made people laugh. How can you make people forget that maybe they have a sick child or there's been a death in the family? I was going to do what Mrs. Tresky said. I was going to be an actor.
Oh, that's a great line. That is a clip from The Life of Reilly. So there are a lot of props, and I really like the props. There's one point where he's reading the TV guide, and there's a list. There's one where his first acting class is the teacher's list, and it dawned on me, this is real. These things are real. That flashlight is real. Tell me about these props in this film.
I've got the flashlight.
You got the flashlight?
It's at my desk at my office, yeah.
They're all real. There's one where he shows his father's drinking problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a yellow funnel that he puts into a bottle of cheap whiskey that, he pours. Mm-hmm. And we didn't like the color yellow. We wanted to switch that prop out. And all they had to say was, no, that's it. He used a yellow funnel. That's it.
That's the funnel?
Yeah, the funnel. Everything he had was, if you looked at that TV guide, there he is.
See, I find that really powerful. I think it really gives a certain authenticity to this film, which brings me to my next question. And for both of you, what is the role of the documentary filmmaker? Let's start with you. What is the role? What are you supposed to be doing?
That's a tough question. It varies. I think it varies from film to film.
What was your role in this film?
And this film was just to capture him.
Just to capture him?
Just to capture him, right. A film I'm making now, I'm kind of forcing it. Mm-hmm. Forcing the narrative along. But then it's tough. It just varies from documentary to documentary. This one was...
I actually disagree that it was just to capture, though, because it was such a... he never did the same show twice, okay? Right. So for every night, every time he gave us a tape that, here's Laguna, 2002, it was a completely different show. There was overlapping pieces, but it was not just to capture it. I think it was also to get Charles to do the pieces that were the most revealing and truthful that for him and his experience and his life. Oftentimes he would do something in one show, and you'd see it in one of these tapes and say, "That's great, Charles. We want to do that." He'd say, "Oh, I don't do that. I haven't done that in years," or "I just did it that one night," or So to make him, to help guide him to the point where he could be as honest as I think he is in this film was I think something that we did.
Well, we pre-did that. We broke his show down from the various tapes. We picked what we wanted ahead of time. But it still was a job to capture him because he meandered every night.
Just keeping up with him with the cameras.
I was going to say,
the
this is an
camera
hour
is
the film?
The film.
How long's the film? I'm trying to remember.
About an hour and 25
minutes.
About
an hour and 25, yeah.
But the show is, 4 or 5 hours long, right?
Well,
night
3
to
and a
night.
half, 4, depending
some
upon the
nights
night.
2, some nights 3.
Is that an editing nightmare?
Yes.
We had 4 cameras, 2 nights. Was supposed to be 3 nights, but
3 nights. He canceled out in a panic attack one night. Total panic attack. And we refunded tickets. Went through the whole drama of are we going to get it? We have one night left with him, and he nailed it on one night.
Now tell me, what was he like? I assume he's quite the diva. He seems like total queen.
Yes,
absolutely,
he is. Absolutely.
But then
wonderful,
again,
funny.
Really,
could be difficult.
You understand why he had so many close friends in his life.
Yeah.
You get that in the movie.
Yes.
Here's a guy who has the same friends he had in 1950, a huge group of people. Very warm and very sincere.
Yeah, I wanted to have a Manhattan with him in his living room and talk about the old days that I'm 40. There are no old days for that for me, but I just want to sit and listen to him talk for hours.
These several Manhattans I had in his living room were the most enjoyable Manhattans I will ever have in my life. So.
And I've not had a Manhattan since that has tasted the same.
Especially the time he accidentally brought out the theater prop whiskey and made us all Manhattans, not realizing it was fake
whiskey.
And we were all going... It's
real good, Charles.
Only at Charles Nelson Reilly's house would he have theater prop whiskey.
Theater prop whiskey in the living room. Well, let's see another clip from the film. This one's a little bit more serious, but I think this one kind of sets up what I think is another aspect of his life that I assumed but didn't know as well. So here's another clip from the documentary, The Life of Reilly.
I had to get a job. And I had a friend that worked at NBC. And she got me an appointment with Vincent J. Donahue, who was a famous Broadway producer and director. And NBC hired him to elevate the acting level on the NBC dramas. And the secretary of Vincent J. Donahue was very sweet. She knew I was kind of nervous. And so she gave me a cup of coffee, and I waited. And then she said, "Mr. Donahue will see you now." The president of NBC. I walked into his office, and he sat at a very beautiful desk. It was a corner office. You could see all New York and New Jersey and the river. And you could even see the Bronx. See, where I lived. Vincent J. Donahue had a beautiful suit, and he was sitting with a gold cigarette lighter. And I stood for a few moments, and he looked at me. And then he said, "They don't let queers on television." It was a very short interview. So I went down the elevator to the lobby, and I sat on one of the couches. I wasn't going to be on television. It's very interesting because what he said didn't bother me at all. I didn't believe it, that I had such armor, that did not bother me at all. What bothered me was when I got home, I would have roaches in the minute rice. That's lousy. But what this man said to me, it didn't bother me because the voice in my head said his words are inaccurate. His words are inaccurate. So it didn't bother me.
His words are inaccurate. Who did you make this film for?
Well, I made this film for my grandfather, actually. My grandfather he just turned 96, and he's a huge game show channel fan. And I wish it was sort of a more dramatic story, but really it is just that every time I go home, he's watching the game show channel at his house and loves that Charles Nelson Reilly. And, you know, after years of sort of seeing this and knowing about this show, I thought, well, I've made a couple films in my life. Every film I've ever been involved with, I could not show my grandfather, and he always wants to see him. They're either too raunchy or violent or whatever. So I was like, I have to. He's getting up there now. It's like I have to make something that I can actually show my grandfather and in front of an audience and thank him for everything. So, which I was able to do when we premiered it at the Milwaukee Film Festival.
And who did you make the film for?
Myself.
What does that mean?
It means I made it for my own enjoyment.
It seems like it's interesting that you say
I did that too.
You did that too. But it seems like a powerful reason to make a film.
That's the only reason to make anything.
The only reason to make anything.
Yeah.
What did Charles Nelson Reilly think? And now he passed away soon after you were finished with the film, right?
Yeah, we didn't notice till we were editing. I think he knew he was dying, and you can tell from all the footage we've looked at.
Right.
But at the time, we had delusions of him making his 100th appearance on The Tonight Show, which he could have made and would have made had he lived, to promote the film. But he was dying at the time, and What was your question again?
Well, no, did he get to see the film?
Yes, of course. He saw many versions of it, and he enjoyed it.
I'm sure he enjoyed it a lot. I mean, it must have been a very powerful experience for him.
Well, we kept it from him for a while.
I can imagine that, too.
Oh, yeah,
so,
that first showing
his idea was you can't cut anything, so it would have been a 3.5-hour
An epic. An epic. A Charles Nelson Reilly epic.
Yeah, well, especially when you think that he did different stuff every night. To put it all in would have been like 5 hours. So we cut it down to about an hour and a half. I called him up and told him, we have a cut to show you. It's an hour and a half. It was just dead silence on the other end of the phone. An hour and a half was inconceivable. What we would have, the violation we must have done to his story.
He nearly ripped the stage direction was done by another man.
Paul Link.
Paul Link, wonderful stage director. And Charles nearly ripped his head off for trimming, half of the play when it was running in New York.
So Charles, I invited him over to my house to watch the premiere, or to do a premiere just for Charles, and I was most nervous night of my life. He's sitting there, and the end of the film, lights come up, and he's like, "It's very good. You did very good job." So we all drank some Manhattans, and then he called me the next day with about 4 pages of notes. Which were mostly very good notes,
very
and
good notes.
they are almost all in the film.
The guy was
really?
Yeah. The guy was a story man. He really understood story. We just had to get him to stand back from his own story.
Yeah,
it's hard to do, I think, for certain people, for someone like that.
I think once he saw it as a movie, which then he was okay. I see what you guys are doing. How about this? You need, for instance, the inner titles where we talk about where he was going or what he was doing. That was Charles' idea. He was like, I think that you need to...
Yeah. And that was one of our arguments leading up to it was, it's a play that's a movie. That's Charles. No, it's a movie, Charles. It's a movie. Right. No, it's a play that's a movie. No, it's a movie, Charles. We never met.
Were you afraid that people weren't going to get it? I mean, for the people in your office that never heard of Charles Nelson Reilly. No, I got a lot out of it just because I remember who he was, and I thought you guys made him.
A lot of people don't know. Well, most people don't know who he is.
But they still like the film, right?
Oh, yeah, people love the film regardless of...
Those who've seen it.
Not a lot of people have seen this film.
More people
the 792 people on this planet who've seen the film have loved it. So.
Well, I'm letting all my friends buy it. Well, I want to see another clip, and I think this is the clip that made me cry, made me laugh and cry. It's like this wonderful comedy. You guys did a good job with that, by the way, making me laugh and then cry at the same. Or maybe he did a good job. You guys.
I think Charles did a good job.
Well, here's another clip from the documentary, The Life of Reilly.
A voice in my head tells me that I am at the twilight of an extraordinary life. I say extraordinary because of the people who have loved me. I say twilight because of what people say to me in the supermarket. No, it's true. I'll be pushing my wagon, minding my own business, and a woman will see me and go, oh, I thought you were dead. Harry, come here, look who's here. We thought he was dead. He's in jams and jellies. Whatever happened to you? Well, Harry, who is it? He's got 3 names. Harry, he's got 3 names. We'll never forget you. You were so funny. You made Harry and I laugh so many times. You were so wonderful. You'll always be in our heart. I felt like saying it was a lovely service, wasn't it?
That's a great clip. So you guys are both from small towns in Wisconsin. And I was thinking about, and I'm from a small town, not Wisconsin, but in Ohio, and I was thinking about the older guys in the town, the old lady, the older men, and what it would be like if we just went around and just captured all their stories. I mean, do you think that there's a market? This was successful, right? Made it to the film circuits. It was in theaters. Do you think there's a market for just us out there telling our grandparents' stories, our elders' stories?
No. It's a great thing to do, and it should be done, but I don't think there's a market.
I think the way that he tells a story is
rare.
He spent an entire life sort of becoming a storyteller that can bring you from laughter to tears, and in order to, I think that there are good films to be made doing that, but it's much more of a challenge than you might think. I couldn't just walk up with a camera, spend a week like I did with Charles, and make something.
And it's a problem I'm running into with my current film. They have fascinating stories, but they're not Charles.
Not good
Yeah.
storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's interesting. I'm sitting here thinking about, this is a show about independent filmmakers, Wisconsin independent filmmakers, and that's what you guys are. And we're talking about these independent films, and a lot of people just don't have any budgets to make films, but they're still doing it from their heart. If there was a market for this, if you had bigger budgets, if you had, X amount of money for a film like this, would it ruin it? Does it need to stay on the level it is to make a film like Life of Reilly, which is an amazing film? But if you had more money and a whole staff, would it ruin it? I mean, does independent films have to be? I think you guys have experienced a little bit of both. So
yeah.
What I mean, you probably do we need the George Lucas budgets, or is it better to keep it down for these kind of films?
Well, I think what's interesting about a film like this is that you couldn't have made a film like this 10 years ago, because if you think about the fact running 4 cameras, 2 nights, 4 hours, the film budget would have been about $1 million just for the 35 millimeter raw film. To shoot this on HD, we were able to do it for significantly less. So I think that the opportunity now exists to tell all kinds of stories that you couldn't tell before.
That's a huge point. The death of film is the best thing that ever happened to filmmakers.
The documentarians, certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly, yeah. It's just democratized it. I think we're seeing a lot of better documentaries because of that.
So it's not a matter of would the film be, if you had more money, would the film be not as good because it would somehow be spoiled? The fact is that it just wouldn't.
You're saying it wouldn't be as good?
It wouldn't be as good.
I would say it wouldn't exist. I mean, I just don't think the economics are such that...
We would not have, no one would have green-lighted this.
No.
Ever. However, had we had the budget and that much support, it would have been killed in committee. You'd see a very staid, standard issue film.
So it's funny, I get a theme with that with filmmakers. It's not really about the money; it's about the independent.
Yeah, you couldn't have shot this handheld if somebody had financed it. I mean, HBO wouldn't have let you shoot a film like this.
As it was,
with
as it was,
with cameras.
Our producers were freaking out that we were shooting it handheld. As it was.
Wow.
And that's on a very small scale.
Well, I just want to tell you guys both, you told an excellent story. You changed my mind about another human being, Charles Nelson Reilly, and that has meaning to me. So I really appreciate it, and I hope that you guys come back. I know you're working on other stuff, and we want to have you guys back on the show again, and we really appreciate making such a great documentary. Thank you very much,
Charles.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, and thank you all very much for joining us today. And thanks for watching Director's Cut. For more information on today's show or any of the films featured on our show, please go to our website at wpt.org/directorscut. While you're there, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. I'm your host, Charles Monroe Kane, and for everyone here at Director's Cut, thank you for joining us. Check the gate.